What's going on, folks? Look, if you grew up in the 90s or if you're just a fan of classic cinema, I know y'all know this movie. But back in the day, the Hughes brothers opened Menace to Society with a scene that a lot of us know all too well. Because you got Old Dog and Kane, just two young brothers walking in a corner store to grab a drink, drinking it right there in the store. And I mean, like, wasn't they minors? Because I know Kane had just graduated from high school, and I don't think Old Dog has ever even set foot inside a classroom. But they both were still underage. I know they wasn't 21. But I'm guessing store clerks probably don't even check for IDs like that in the hood. But as they was walking around, these Asian store owners was watching them like hawks. The clerk's wife was following them down the aisle, pretending she's dusting, and she's telling them, hurry up and buy. And now for a lot of us who grew up during this era, this is a movie that we've all made fun of a lot. We quoted it constantly, but in this particular scene, we turned hurry up and buy into a running joke for over 30 years and we laughed at it. But the truth is that we only laugh because of how common it is. You know, the reason why that scene still resonates is because that exact same script is still playing out on our streets today. Every young black man watching this knows exactly what it feels like to be profiled and trailed down an aisle, whether if it's an Asian convenience store or a white-owned grocery store. That movie helped us cope with it. It made us feel like we weren't just being paranoid about how we were being treated in those stores. And we watched this, but I got to remind y'all that this script didn't just come out of nowhere because, first off, the Hughes brothers dropped this movie around, I say around 93 or 94, somewhere around there. I know it was right after the LA riots, which was in 92, so this movie had to be around 93. And see, this movie was holding up a mirror to what was happening on the streets back then, like the police brutality, the politicians turning their backs on the hood, and our communities just being left to rot. And some people would just see Menace to Society and would think it's just a movie for entertainment, but it was just a straight up warning because Washington, D.C. was pushing that war on drugs bullshit real hard, using these garbage terms like super predators to label black kids. All that just to justify locking up a whole generation of us away. And on top of that, the Hughes brothers also made this movie because they was fierce about something real that happened just a couple of years before. And they wrote it because of this 15-year-old black girl named Latasha Harlins because back in the early 90s, Latasha was walking into a convenience store in LA, and this female Korean store owner accused her of stealing a bottle of orange juice that only cost $1.79. And she didn't even steal the orange juice. She never even had a chance to pay for it. She walked up to the cash register holding $2 bills openly in her hand, ready to pay for it. But for some strange reason, this store clerk accused her of shoplifting and grabbed her by her sweater and just started a whole physical altercation. And after that brief physical scuffle they had, Latasha put the orange juice right back on the counter and turned around and started to walk away, and the owner shot her right in the back of the head. And when the cops arrived, they found her dead, still clutching those $2 in her hand, which was fucked up and sad. And if that wasn't crazy enough, this owner walked out of the courtroom with just probation and zero jail time. And that just shows you how deep these misunderstandings and tensions went down because it wasn't just young men clashing. It was a middle-aged female shopkeeper who was like 51 at the time and a 15-year-old girl. And Menace to Society was just reflecting that painful reality. And that brings us to the craziness that's been going on since then and lately, you know, as far as our black youth and the justice system is concerned. And see, that's why it hits deep when it comes to these foreigners killing our kids because the courtroom is sitting there looking at it, you know, technically, but we got to break down exactly what went wrong here from a perspective that sees the reality of the streets and not just legal paperwork. Now, on June 1st, this cycle began again when we watched this 61-year-old Asian dude, Rick Chow, get acquitted for shooting 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack Belton in the back over a false accusation of stealing water bottles. And this killing happened at a gas station down in South Carolina about a couple of years ago. And like I said, this Rick Chow case showed us a whole lot about the deep tension between the black and Asian communities. And I've spoken on this before because we got to be honest about this historical lack of respect here because for decades, these foreign business owners have came straight into the heart of the black neighborhoods, set up shop on our blocks and took our hard-earned dollars. But they never gave us an ounce of real respect or support back, though we're the ones that's funding their livelihoods, because we're buying their drinks, we're buying their food, but we're still being treated like an outsider in the store, supported by other minorities. And why is that? That's because, a lot of these folks coming over here to America and immediately adopt that whitewash mainstream Western bias. They letting those negative media portrayals condition their minds before they even interact with a single black person. So when a 14-year-old child like Cyrus walks into that store, Rick Chow didn't see a customer there to do business because his mind was already pre-programmed by systemic stereotypes to see a threat. Mr. Chow didn't see a teenager, he saw a target. And I know what that psychological weight feels like because I lived it. Because I think about an experience I had when I was 13 years old, just a few months before turning 14. I was in the 8th grade, so this was during the 1997-98 school year. But I just got out of school. My mom picked me up, and we didn't go straight home. We went to the grocery store, Winn-Dixie on 4th and Oak, which is no longer around. And now, usually going to the store with your mama is just a regular boring chore. But this particular day became the day I was racially profiled by a police officer. And though nothing happened, it's just a raw truth of how a regular day turned into a lesson that I'll never forget. So we get to the store, and like any 13, 14-year-old kid, I didn't want to just walk behind my mom all day while she's picking out groceries. I wanted to scatter around, go look at the snacks, find a soda, just doing my own thing. I wanted to feel independent. And I told her, I was telling her, hey, Ma, can I go look for some snacks or whatever that we can take home? And she was like, yeah, go ahead. And as I was moving through the store looking at the shelves, I noticed this on-duty white police officer. And every single aisle I go to, this man was right behind me. I go look at the chips, he's there. I go towards the coolers, he's there. He's literally following a child around a grocery store, tracking my hands, waiting for me to slip up and steal a 99-cent bag of chips. Now, around this time, I had grown early. I was a big kid. I was always big for my age. And when you're a big black kid like I was, there's going to be some folks who's going to stop seeing your youth and start seeing you as a threat, just like this cop did me. But I was still a kid regardless, so I started to feel that heavy, uncomfortable pressure from this cop. But here's what the story shifted. My mom noticed it. She saw this grown, armed police officer stalking her son through the grocery store. And let me tell you, it bothered her deeply because I could still see the shift in her face, that protective instinct. Because, she didn't cause a scene or nothing. She didn't lose a cool or nothing like that because she knew how dangerous that uniform could be. She looked at me and said, here, just stay with me. And I did. I walked right back to her side. We finished our shopping. She paid for our items, and that was that. The officer backed off once he saw that I was covered by her. You see, my mom, she knew what it was. She knew that all it takes was one wrong move, one split second, one misunderstanding for a black child to become a statistic. And her presence was my shield that day. But Cyrus didn't have his mother there to anchor him. He didn't have that shield. And look, honestly, I get it that Rick Chow's wife had every right to confront him at first. She was watching him put the bottles in his sleeve. And if you run in a business and you suspect someone is taken from your store, you have a right to check. And though it was a misunderstanding, but confronting him inside the store to clear it up, that's just business. And all they had to do was ask him, keep it civil, and it would have been resolved right then and there. Because all Miss Chow had to do was be like, hey, empty your pockets or let me see your hands. That would have been the instant proof right there that nothing was stolen. It would have ended that whole dispute in 3 seconds. But they was like, nah, fuck that. They don't want the truth. And this is more than just a case of a jury making a bad call. It goes way deeper than that. And it's just how the legal system is built politically. Because when these politicians are writing stand your ground or property defense laws, they intentionally leave huge gray areas in the text. They do that on purpose. And by doing that, they're basically making a political choice on whose lives are worth protecting under the law and whose lives just ain't worth the fuck. Because Rick Chow and his son, they didn't have to chase and shoot Cyrus. Because once Cyrus put the items back and walked out of the store, the business aspect was done and over with. Because if the child was still feeling like a crime had been committed or wanted to press the issue, they could have just simply called the cops. They could have let the authorities handle it while staying safe inside their building, because that's what the system is there for. But instead of just picking up the phone and call the police, this 61-year-old man and his grown son chose to grab a gun, leave their property and hunt down a 14-year-old boy down the street. And at that point, it wasn't protecting merchandise anymore. They became the aggressors. So what is that child supposed to feel? He's going to feel threatened. He's going to be terrified. And he ran because the survival instincts kicked in, not because he did something wrong. And they found a gun near Cyrus, which was the defense's main argument. And suddenly that whole story in court completely changed. Now everybody was just focusing on that. And look, let me keep it 100 with y'all. I don't think Cyrus should have been carrying a gun at all, because we got to be honest about accountability. And a 14-year-old child simply has no business carrying a firearm. And if we're being really honest, he came in that store with a gun and an empty book bag, and that wasn't a good look. Because when Cyrus was putting those water bottles in his sleeve, that wasn't a good look either. It made him look suspect. Because, I mean, I've been in stores and I've picked up items, looked at them, and decided I didn't want them. But I never, ever put them in my pocket or up my sleeve, because I know how that looks on camera. I know the script. Now, it's possible that maybe he was just doing that to help him carry them as he was planning to get more stuff. But regardless of how it looked, the fact remains, he did put them back. He walked out of that store as an innocent child. But watch, the system's going to try to stretch those limits of what self-defense even means, just to protect the store owner who literally hunted him down. But in that courtroom, the defense painted this young brother as some kind of deadly threat, all to justify why a grown man pulled the trigger. The owner's son actually got up there under oath and swore that Cyrus tripped, fell, and pointed a loaded gun at him. He was testifying that he honestly thought he was going to die, and they were using that to claim that Rick only fired to save his son's life. But the prosecution, pushed back hard on that one. They was arguing that the son was flat out lying just to cover for his dad, and they brought out the medical reports and physical evidence to prove it. And the reality is that Cyrus was shot right in the back while he was trying to run away. And on top of that, you even had multiple witnesses who saw the chase testifying that they never saw anything in Cyrus's hand, and they never seen him point a weapon at anybody. And I mean, the prosecution did acknowledge that Cyrus had a gun on him, but they argued that it just fell out of his clothes while he was running for his life. He never threatened a soul. But as long as the shooter claims they feel threatened, the system's going to back them up. But look at the hypocrisy of when the roles flip. A grown Asian man can chase an empty-handed 14-year-old black kid down the street, shoot him in the back, and walk away scot-free. But if a black kid like Carmelo Anthony, who was only a $130 soaking wet, reacts out of pure fear, he gets the book thrown at him. People may want to say race had nothing to do with it, but we just saw Carmelo get handed down a 35-year prison sentence down in Texas by a jury that didn't have a single black person on it. So when you look at the cases like Chow Rittenhouse, the courts look at the violence, look at the bodies left behind, and decide that their fear was justified. Their self-defense is always okay. But when it's a young black kid being cornered by people twice his size, his fear is treated like a crime. And that tells you everything you need to know about who is actually allowed to feel safe in this country. Because, I mean, I get it that Carmelo was defending himself against that kid who walked up on him, but personally, I think he should have just walked away from that tent. And he should have never had a knife on him at all, to be honest. So that was a bad choice. Because, I mean, it ain't always about being tough or proving that you ain't a punk all the time. Because when you find yourself in one of those high-risk, heated situations, sometimes you just got to take that temporary L and keep it moving. It would have de-escalated the whole thing, and he still would have had his freedom. But that's just the painful reality we're dealing with today. Because when you're a young black dude in America, the system gives you zero room for error and no grace at all. All it takes is one bad decision, one split-second reaction of fear, and your whole life is completely snatched away from you. Because whether it's getting caught up in a beef at a track meet or simply walking into the wrong neighborhood store, it's still the same. Because, I mean, this young brother, Cyrus, should be at home right now, figuring out high school, playing video games, just being a normal teen. But instead, his family is left with an empty room and a broken justice system. And see, that's the part that brings us right back to where we started. Because think about how that movie, Menace to Society, opens. We could talk about the hurry up and buy line, but how does that whole scene play out? The Asian store owner tells him, I don't want any trouble, just get out. And right there, it could have been done and over with. Old Dog and Kane had just paid for their drinks, and they was already walking towards the exit. But that Asian man's ego just won't let it go. He had to say something extra to insult Old Dog on the way out, and that's what ticked him off and escalated everything. He snaps, pull out a gun, and shoots that clerk because Old Dog was known to be a crazy ass Negro, a psychopath. You know, he was wilded out, shooting everybody with no remorse. And for over 30 years, mainstream society looked at that movie as proof of why Asian shopkeepers need to be terrified of young black men. It reinforced the stereotype and justified the fear. But Cyrus was an Old Dog, and the reality of this Rick Chow case was that Rick Chow, who was the store owner, brought the lethal violence to an innocent black child. Cyrus didn't snap. Cyrus didn't pull a weapon. Cyrus put the water bottles back, turned his back, and ran for his life. And he was still the one who ended up getting shot down that alley. And the system has been spending decades preparing for that fictional threat of Old Dog, using it to justify tracking and hunting our kids down the aisle. Now, I'm not saying that all Asian or foreign stores are like this, because personally, I don't experience this in Asian stores, at least not anymore. Because if I'm being honest, that could be because I'm an older guy now, in my 40s, and I no longer look like a youth. So they probably feel a lot more comfortable seeing me walk into their shop. But for a teenager, that's a whole different thing, because when a real business owner acts as the aggressor, hunts a child down and pulls the trigger, the court calls it self-defense. The roles flip, but who gets blamed stays exactly the same. And that's the trap. Even when you're ultimately innocent, the system's always going to take a bad look, a minor suspicion, and want to use it after the fact for justification. Because politicians, they love to debate the Second Amendment. But cases like this shows that the political right to bear arms only work, for certain people. Because when a white citizen exercises gun rights, they're labeled a patriot or a defender. But when a black citizen is even suspected of having a gun, his constitutional rights are completely erased by the system. And that's why we have to walk on eggshells at all times the second we step out in public. Because I remember how my mom used to get on my case constantly just for wearing hoodies inside stores. Because she'd be like, take that hood off your head, looking all thuggish. You look like you're about to rob. I mean, she knew what the world was waiting to accuse me of. And that's the thing about being black. We get grouped together with the thugs and gangbangers, no matter how nice, cool, or respectful we actually are. White dudes get to be seen as individuals, but we're just seen as one big giant black man. And that's why this case happened, because, Rick Chow chose to grab a firearm, chose to leave his store, and chose to hunt a child down the street. And we could argue that this child shouldn't have been carrying a weapon in the first place, which he shouldn't have. And we can say the exact same thing about Kyle Rittenhouse, who was only 17 and out there with a firearm on him. But with Cyrus, there could be reasons we don't know about. Like, he could be terrified of the environment around him or whatever. But regardless of that, when you chasing a terrified kid down an alley and shoot him in the back while he's running away, you can't tell me that's self-defense. A shot in the back means the person was fleeing. It means the threat was moving away from you. You can't look me in the eye and tell me that's self-defense, because when someone gets off scot-free like that, we got to demand real accountability from the politicians and the system that let it happen. We got to look at the prosecutors who don't bring the right charges, the laws that value property more than a human life, in a legal system where juries rarely even look like the communities they're supposed to represent. And the jury let Mr. Chow walk last month. That sent a loud, painful message that we've all heard way too many times before, that a black child's life could be snuffed out over a misunderstanding. So rest in peace to Cyrus Carmack Belton, a young life that ended before it really began. And June just wasn't a good month for black youth at all. And it's sad. And that's just my perspective. Let me know what you think down below. Stay safe out there. Peace.